right, good morning, everyone. We are here for the citywide business plan goal of planning, zoning, economic development. First of all, thank you to everyone who contributed content. This one is a very big presentation. And as such, I have put in some artificial times that we need to hit, some milestones, and only I know them. So I will likely cut you off or speed you along a little in order to get through all of the content. As usual, we will be doing some social media around this on Twitter, so our residents can tweet in at us with questions now during this live event or later when they watch it archived. And Mark, are we not doing something else different this time with social media? Are we streaming this in a different way?
Yeah, we're doing it on YouTube.
We are doing this on YouTube Live, so it will later be archived on YouTube as well. All right.
The colorized version?
Yes, yes, in HD. All right, so let's start rolling. We have the objectives and strategies for the goal of planning, zoning, economic development. This is a new structure of the business plan. I believe we started looking at this last fall, but these strategies are a continuation of the plan that was adopted in October. These are the high-level metrics, and we'll get into most of those throughout the presentation. All right, first objective up is to create and implement aggressive neighborhood revitalization plans with special emphasis on historically disinvested corridors and neighborhoods. So I believe that will kick us off with strategy A and City Planning Department.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Jeffrey Williams, City Planning and Development. Actually, strategy A is talking about developing an update to the city's comprehensive plan and focus. Just so people are aware of what a comprehensive plan does, it's a long-range vision for the city and setting some priorities and guides for land use and development and doing that on a citywide scale. Focus. It was a really big effort on the part of this city, developed during the mid to late 1990s. It was adopted in 1997. Traditionally, plans of that nature and Focus is multi-volumed, 800-plus pages, a very in-depth look at how the next 25 years of development would take place here in Kansas City, Missouri. So we are getting close to that time of having to open up that plan, amend it, make additions to it, reflect all the developments happened since its original adoption. And what we're looking to do this year is, in the latter part of this year, is really start to have a series of listening sessions, just reaching out to all the stakeholders of Kansas City and get their feedback on development patterns, get their feedback on transportation network, have understandings about housing, really get a sense of where the stakeholders are looking to see this community move 25 years after the next plan's adoption. And a little bit of a commercial today, we're actually doing a listening session this afternoon at 1 o'clock. The city is listening. That session is focusing in on the updating of the greater downtown area plan. So if people have a chance, that will be live streamed as well starting at 1 o'clock today. So you'll hear from city staff and stakeholders about our thoughts and our ideas, and really hoping to get suggestions from the community about how that plan gets updated. The next piece after you talk about a comprehensive plan, it goes to strategy B, is using and looking at the effectiveness of area plans and the implementation committees to implement recommendations coming out of area plans. Area plans, the city's divided into 18 different planning areas. This was really done to make a much more manageable process as it relates to long-range planning in the city. It also consolidated multiple documents that were providing guidance for the same or similar areas. So people over the years may have participated in neighborhood plans or corridor plans or business district plans. The area plans pull all of that together. About 2 months ago, we completed that 10-year process of having all those plans updated, and all those are available on our website. The implementation committees are the group of stakeholders and citizens that help us shape the plan, and now we rely on them to help encourage both private sector and us to implement recommendations coming out of that plan. You're seeing the statistics there. To put all that work together, over 275 public meetings, 11,000 hours of staff time put in place to get these plans prepared. This year, we're going to start the cycle and start going back and look at those older plans and start updating those. So we'll be reaching out to ask for citizen assistance as we update those plans.
I think it is worth note that Jeff and his staff have worked diligently for 2 years to get those plans updated. So it's worthy of celebration.
I appreciate that, yeah, and I do want to thank not only staff members, but representatives of really all the city departments, because these plans really reflect the development and vision that only gets implemented through participation and cooperation from city staff and the Economic Development Corporation as well.
All right, moving into Objective 4, efficiency of city development activity, Strategy A.
I'll start this off, and I don't know if Rick will add pieces as well. Compass KC is the name of our new entitlement system. That is the software that will handle our development process. So right now, people may be familiar with the Kiva system. It will be replaced with Compass KC. City services at your fingertips. It's not just focused on city planning and development. There are 8+ other departments that will be a part of the initial rollout of Compass KC. Once people register, and we encourage users to register, people who are submitting development projects will have to register in the system. Other people will register into the system to be able to look in on the development process and find more information out about projects being contemplated. But it's a comprehensive suite of software that will not only give customers a greater glimpse in the development process and tracking of projects, it is also the software that we as city staff will rely on in terms of processing applications, in terms of recording comments on plans and documents, in terms of field inspectors being able to post notes and condition, all with the idea that this information will be kept in one database and we'll be able to push the information out among city departments and really be able to share more information with stakeholders and applicants.
You said you called it what? An entitlement system?
An entitlement system, a system that helps us be able to approve our development process and plans. So entitlement probably not the right phrase for it.
Yeah,
but essentially it's our permitting system.
Okay,
So
yeah,
entitlement,
all right.
development.
Applications that go through CPC are sometimes termed that way, but
Termed
it
what
is
way?
as an entitlement process because you have to show that you qualify for it in order to obtain rezoning, right? Development incentives.
That may be a shorthand way to refer to it internally. I think it's a pejorative term externally.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never heard that word used in that way. Can you find a different way of describing it other than entitlements?
Well,
It's not
in the description
not
of the-
welfare. It's
the-
not Medicare. It's not Medicaid. It's not an entitlement.
Well, typically we describe Compass KC as our citywide permitting and inspection system. And as Jeff's pointed out, we've got 9 city departments. This really is the culmination of about a 2.5-year effort of working with city departments. We're all going to be on the same platform. We're all going to be sharing data. We're actually reducing.
Not questioning the value. I'm questioning the phrase.
Yeah,
That's
I
all.
understand.
You know, can it be a qualification software? Can it be something other than an entitlement? That's the only point that I'm making.
I appreciate that. It's our permitting system. Essentially, anybody who needs a permit across a number of departments will use this system.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the idea, again, really is to make sure that we're sharing information. This is facilitating electronic filing of documents for people, so at the end of the day, it's less paper storage for us as well.
The reason I point that out is that I don't think that we want to be using the term entitlement in conjunction with development and developers. That's already a phrase that will rub people the wrong way, and I don't think you'll have time to explain it. But once it's called that and it sticks, then it's all these developers getting those entitlements. I just don't think that's the way we want to describe the process. That's all.
Oh, no, appreciated and duly noted. We are having an open house that lets people take a look at the system. That's happening this Thursday, April 5th at the Mohart Center. So all throughout the day, starting at 9 o'clock, we will have segments, 90-minute sessions all throughout the day where people can come and see the software, take a look, understand how it would be important to their development approval process, and they'll understand all the different aspects of city project approval that this system will handle. So we encourage people to come out and take a look at the training, at the software. Training, end user training, is taking place right now, and that will be completed by April the 6th. And again, the software system, as we convert from Kiva over to Compass KC, there will be a period of time in which we will be without our permitting software. So we will notify people. It'll be about a 2-day period where we won't have access to that software. So we'll be able to provide services to various departments, but maybe not a full suite of services. And we're scheduled to go live on Monday, April 23rd. So we're excited about it. It's a really big push. Just to give the scope of this, about 800 city employees will rely on this system to do their work every day. So a good bit of our workforce. But at the end of the day, we really want to make the development process more transparent, and we want to give more people access to information to help them understand how the community is growing and building.
Sounds good.
All right, objective 3. So a note on this one, we actually had 2 strategies under 2 different objectives that have a similar wording, and so we've actually lumped them together for this purpose. In the future, as we build these actions out under the citywide business plan, probably have content under each of them, but this time we wanted to report them sort of together. So objective 1 under, or strategy C under objective 1 and objective 3. All right, Opportunity Zone.
Okay, good morning. Carrie Tyndall with the City Manager's Office. So one of the big challenges that we face when we're trying to target resources towards distressed areas of our community is providing adequate access to capital. So we're very excited that we have another tool in our toolbox, we have the potential for another tool in our toolbox, because in conjunction with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was approved by Congress this year, they have created a new program called Opportunity Zone. It's administered by the U.S. Treasury Department, and basically it encourages long-term investments in low-income communities and provides a tax incentive for investors to reinvest their unrealized capital gains. There are 2 major components to the Opportunity Zone program. There are the zones themselves, and then there are the funds, which are the mechanism for which investors then can funnel their resources into these areas of distress where then they can be invested. It was a highly competitive process. It is something that is driven at the state level through nominations to the Treasury Department by the governors, and is something that is targeted not just at urban distressed areas, but also rural distressed areas. Throughout the state of Missouri, there were about 160 census tracts that were eligible for this program. Eligibility for the zones themselves was based on risk factors for distress and included things like poverty rates and median family income. Within the city of Kansas City, there were over 50 census tracts that would have qualified under this program. And so one of our challenges was trying to put together a plan that we could submit to the governor's office for Kansas City to provide a chance for us to take advantage of this program. As I mentioned, it's highly competitive, and the turnaround time on this application was very aggressive. So upon notification of the availability of the program and when the applications were actually due to the state was approximately 3 weeks. So given that amount of time to come up with a plan, we took an approach of trying to amplify and build upon existing successful strategies that were already underway within the community, thinking that this would provide an additional layer of leverage for those strategies, and that we knew that then we would be supporting things that were already priorities of the community. Because the governor's office is making the ultimate determination on this program, we had to do a little bit of strategizing about what we thought might be something that would be attractive to the governor's office. And so we talked both about redevelopment opportunities as well as business development opportunities, and came up with an approach of identifying key clusters of census tracts in Kansas City. So instead of prioritizing individual census tracts and then kind of having a scattershot approach. What we tried to do was group them so that in the event that the state did ultimately cut the census tracts that we were submitting and nominating on behalf of Kansas City, then we could have a better chance of keeping some of those initiatives together and making sure that, if we were going to fund something that that strategies would be funded together, and that there was also a good story that we could tell to the State Department of Economic Development in terms of why we thought that that was a priority. So that application was submitted to DED in early March, and we received a response back from them in about the 21st that they had actually cut our original application down from 54 census tracts to 28 census tracts. The governor has there's a review period, and the governor's office then has to make their final nominations to the Treasury Department. The governor for the state of Missouri has requested an extension, which they had the opportunity to do under the legislation, and they are extending their deadline to the 6th of April. So they have provided back to us a list of the census tracts that they have on their current nomination list, which was about half of what we had originally submitted, but it is very largely centered around the kind of south of the river and what we would consider the east side of Kansas City, and around initiatives such as Paseo Gateway, urban neighborhood initiatives, 18th and Vine, 12th Street Heritage Corridor, some of the key initiatives that the city has underway. So we are waiting to hear back from the governor's office, which we hope to hear in the next week or so, about what they have made as their final nominations to the Treasury Department. Then kind of the challenge at that point shifts over into what the rules and regulations are going to be for the program. So there's been tremendous interest in the community about how these resources could be deployed and how we could use this to further redevelopment needs in the community. But a big piece of this is the funds themselves and attracting investors who want to park their capital in these funds so that we have resources available to do these types of redevelopment. And so I think one of the big topics of conversation over the next couple of weeks is going to be how we, Kansas City, position ourselves in terms of either attracting investors or trying to link investors up to some of the key strategies that are on our priority list for getting accomplished. And as the Treasury looks at those nominations from each of the state's governors and comes out with more detail on how those programs are going to be administered, we'll better know how we can partner with organizations such as CDFIs and business operation or businesses and investors who may be wanting to put their capital into these funds and then matching them up with community needs. And I don't know if Jennifer Tidwell has any other comments. So this was a multi-departmental effort to try and put this application together. And so I do want to thank the folks here today who helped contribute to that, which included the Planning Department and the EDC and the Housing Department.
So the only thing I would like to add is that we also, as part of our application, had at least 3 CDFIs that have interest in doing investment in our Kansas City area. I think there will be a lot more once the regulations from Treasury comes out. So there's a lot of interest in this program.
Yep. And I just want to emphasize the need for interest amongst the investor community. I think that's going to be a really critical aspect of the success of this program, is making sure that we have funds available to take advantage of.
And how do you plan to come by those funds?
Jennifer might want to weigh on this, but I think that I think it's going to be incumbent upon us, frankly, to try and market some of the initiatives that we know have need out in the community, and talk about how that could be a place for people who have resources to invest their money and know that those are going to be successful and supported community initiatives. So I think it gives them faith that if they're going to put their resources into a fund, that it's going to go towards something that the community values, and that there are professionals who are monitoring and overseeing those, and that they have a likelihood of success, and that they're being professionally overseen. And I don't know if
And who's going to oversee them?
I think that really is dependent upon how the rules of the Treasury come out about how the funds are managed.
Yes, so the opportunity funds will be supervised by the U.S. Treasury Department. They will be putting out the rules. What they have said to date is that they will be, the criteria will be very similar to how CDFIs are also managed, although the program is a lot different, but they will be very much managed in the way that CDFIs. They're saying large community development organizations, financial institutions, as well as CDFIs will be probably eligible for this, which is why we went out to actually ask for their support of our application. So there are 3 CDFIs that actually work in our community now, and so we're hoping that they will continue to work in our community with these Opportunity Zone funds, and hopefully be able to, with the stories that we're telling in our targeted area, hopefully be able to attract other CDFIs and financial institutions.
It's going to be kind of a limited group, isn't it, though, when you look at it? The people who, this applies to people who, investors to reinvest unrealized capital gains?
Right.
That kind of narrows the market.
So they are saying it's about $3 trillion of unrealized capital gains across the country. And so it is a smaller group of investors that would be actually doing this, but there's a lot of interest. So we believe that we should be able to attract some of those investments. And 2 of the CDFIs are big regional CDFIs that are going to be attracting capital nationwide. You are not encumbered by having to just attract capital from the Kansas City area. It's a nationwide pool. So with those national and regional CDFIs or Opportunity Zones funds, that we will have the opportunity to draw on some of those national funds or regional funds that may be available to us as well.
Good. Thanks.
So just for clarity, the being designated or having a census tract designated as an opportunity zone puts us in play for taking advantage of and drawing down some of the capital investment.
That's
Yes.
exactly right.
And for the good of the cause, can someone tell me CDFI? What does it mean?
Oh, Community Development Financial Institution.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. All right, strategy B. This will be on the Central City sales tax. So I think that's still you, Jennifer.
Okay, great. So as everyone is aware, we have a new tool in our toolbox to help a certain area of the Central City. It's called the Central City Economic Development Sales Tax District. That district begins on 9th Street on the north, Gregory on the south, Indiana on the east, and Paseo on the west. It encompasses a lot of the disadvantaged and distressed areas in our community, and we anticipate that it will collect about $8 to $10 million yearly over the 10-year period. There are 5 board members, advisory board members that are part of the Central City Sales Tax District, and they are now beginning to create priorities around the district and trying to determine how, through a lot of community input and staff input, to develop a good program to do outreach for these funds. So, and what's listed is just some of the demographics of the district. As you can see, most of the population has been decreasing in this area, as well as the median income. We are hoping to turn some of that around. It also tells you about the employment density and what employers are in the area as of today. And hoping to, with this new incentive, to leverage additional dollars in order to be able to do some significant impact in the district.
Okay.
Right, and there are several existing planning initiatives and other economic development drivers within that geographic area as well, and they're listed here. So within that opportunity area. So, all right, strategy A.
Who's up with that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, go right ahead. So we've actually taken, for this first Casey stat with these strategies, we've taken a very broad look at this particular goal. So we sort of brought in a lot of topics that help set the stage for how we'll report out on it in the future. So.
Okay,
Great.
Andrea Dorch with the Human Relations Department, and we also are Economic Development Compliance Officers for the various agencies under the EDC umbrella. For this report, we reported out on the fiscal years of 2015-16 and 16-17, with a major note being that the city's Human Relations Department took over fully the compliance functions of EDC in May of 2016. So you'll see some variances of what we were monitoring, what the outcomes were. For combined MWBE utilization for constructions by agency, you can look at your graph there. For PIEA in 15-16, the combined percentage was 23%, and for fiscal year 16-17, it was 43%. For the fiscal year of 2015-16, those construction numbers were based on PIEA was $239 million worth of construction work, and of that, 23% were MBE, WBE participants. For fiscal year 16-17, there was $195 million worth of work, and you can see the correlating 43% for MWBE utilization. For TIF, there was 24%, and that's stayed pretty steady just because of the types of projects that they've had. The 24% represents about $519 million of the total construction cost. And then on the LCRA for 15-16, you had approximately $132 million worth of cost. For 16-17, we had LCRA had about $160 million, and TIF had $720 million. So that was with the increase from Cerner project taking place, and then we had some other major projects that came in to the loop that we started monitoring there. For the professional services, you'll see for PIEA, it stayed pretty steady. A lot of the projects utilized essentially the same professional services, and those were represented by $14 million worth of professional services in 15-16, and that number jumped to $10.2 million in 2016-17. And for the TIF, it was about $8.9 million in 2015-16, and about $43 million in 16-17. Again, Cerner accounts for a lot of that professional services. For the LCRA, we had approximately $9 million worth of professional services in 15-16, And in 16-17, that number jumped to 13 million, and you can see the corresponding there. On the next slide, we have the Construction Employment Program, which is often confused with our Minority and Women Business Enterprise Program, but it's totally separate and is commonly known as the Construction Workforce Program. We did monitor for KCMO residents, although there is no current goal. In this slide, you'll see that Port Authority is also listed because they had 2 construction projects during that period that we monitored, and you can see the correlating values there. They range from 8% to 15% KCMO residents, and what we do is we count any KCMO resident regardless of race. So they have to have a local resident. It excludes any Grandview or Raytown or Lee Summit or anything like that, so it's true KCMO local. The goal is 2%, and these are in workforce hours. As you can see, we have low percentage. We've been doing outreach since 2014 to get more women in the construction trades. We've been successful by increasing that over the last couple of years. We've had quite a few apprentices join. In June of this year, we'll actually have another outreach event in Mohart for women in construction. And the minority goal was far exceeded by all of the agencies. And you can see with PIEA having so many of the vertical construction hours that they were at the top of the list at 31%.
Great, thank you. All right, we can move into EDC's data.
Good morning. My name's Bob Langenkamp. I'm with the EDC of Kansas City. This first slide sort of relates to one of the basic goals that our board sets for our organization each year, which relates to the amount of capital investment, construction and development that takes place each fiscal year. This chart, this chart tracks not actual construction. This tracks projects that go through the advanced KC project review and evaluation process. Sometimes these projects will go through that process and receive approval months and months before the actual construction takes place. But this tracks when they go through the process and get the approvals and are allowed to go forward. We've tracked this on a month-by-month basis to try and determine if we could identify a seasonal swing. Do we have a particularly in season for these projects going through versus others? I think you can see there's a couple of peaks, obviously. We're probably going to switch this and start looking at it a little more on a year-over-year so you can see what's happened from one year to the next. Our goal for this fiscal year, EDC operates on the same fiscal year as the city does. So our goal for this fiscal year is $1 billion. As you can see in the bar across the bottom, so far we've had a little over $850 million that has gone through the advanced KC process for approvals, leaving us still with $150 million. Given that we're in April, we're going to have to hit it pretty hard if we're going to make it to a $1 billion goal this year. And then also you can see 50-50 split between whether these are new projects or rehabilitation and expansion of existing projects. And we also divide it out by the land use. And overwhelmingly, it's predominantly been residential this fiscal year. The next slide talks about one of our other primary focuses, and that is the attraction of new jobs to Kansas City as well as the retaining of existing jobs, companies that are in Kansas City. In this, we've kind of, excuse me, we've sort of broken this out based on the types of projects. You can see the majority of our projects, although it's pretty close, were attraction. We had a lot of expansions. This has been a pretty good economic year in Kansas City, and businesses are growing, they're hiring, and they're expanding, and we work with them to try and facilitate that expansion, but also to make sure that as they do the expansion, they're staying in Kansas City, Missouri. Divide them out also to track a little bit on the council district. Industry sector, we break these out to see whether the projects that are underway are tracking with what was identified in the Advanced KC program as sort of our top target sector industry groups within Kansas City. We also track where the origin of the projects come from. We do a lot of work with a whole series of partners, whether it's the Kansas City Area Development Council or the state of Missouri. And a lot of these projects come in through those organizations, but you can see also a lot of projects are generated by our own staff, being out in the field, meeting with businesses, talking in the community, and understanding that there are these expansions that are underway. Our annual goal for new jobs is 3,500 jobs. We are a little bit over 3,100 right now. I don't want to break the story, but we're going to have an announcement of a couple more that will add another couple hundred to this by the end of the week. So we'll be pretty close to hitting the goal. Our board has set this goal for us over the last couple years. We've thought it was a little aggressive, but they keep pushing us to try and stretch and hit these targets. We also track not only just the total number of jobs, but the quality of the jobs with respect to salary levels. You can see that the majority of them are above the county and metro area average on salaries. A third goal that they push us is to keep jobs in Kansas City and not lose them to other communities or other states. We've done pretty well so far this year. We have had a couple of announcements just recently of a few companies that were leaving Kansas City, Missouri, or portions of those portions of those companies were leaving Kansas City. So we were going to have coming up on, this is through March. This is through March of the current year. We're going to have a couple that are going to be in April, so we will no longer be at 100% by the end of the fiscal year. The next slide just has a list of projects. These are the actual companies over the last, so far this fiscal year, how many jobs. You can see there's a spread down to as small as 2 or 3 jobs that we work on, as well as some that are, 650, 450. So it's kind of all across the board what these end up working with, and can take as much staff involvement to do the 2-job expansion as it is sometimes for the 450. But they're all important, and it's all, if you get one of these new jobs and it's better than the one you had, it's an improvement on where you were. Okay. These, again, this is just tracking the different projects, Advanced KC projects, 23 of them. This goes to both the new and retained jobs. One of the key, if you go down sort of to the bottom, talks about the ratio of private investment to the public investment that takes place through the incentive processes with the different redevelopment agencies through the Advanced KC process. So far this year, we're looking at a 5-to-1 ratio on these. So it's a pretty good leverage in the amount of the private investment that is taking place, and I think Carrie may have more details on that as we go forward.
Okay.
And Carrie, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, so this initiative speaks to kind of the historic part of our monitoring of incentives. What Andrea and Bob have been talking about was kind of the current activity. And we do a really, really good job of tracking those types of activities on the front end of our economic development projects. But one of the things that we've really struggled with has been what happens after and what's the impact on our community. We've been very poor at telling the story about, how these efforts, very important efforts of the EDC, are helping our community. And largely the data that we had available to us was anecdotal versus very specific. And so the incentives analysis was envisioned as a project to help fill that need. And effectively what we were asking was the question of, is the city getting a reasonable return on its investments in incentives? And if so, how do we go about demonstrating that? So we started this project back in the fall of 2016. It was originally envisioned as a 5-month project, and as we got into it, we quickly realized that it was going to be a lot more challenging than we had originally envisioned. One of the main issues why it has taken so long and why we have had to spend some time digging into the details on this is because the data that was collected for economic development largely wasn't collected with the intention of doing this type of analysis. It was very transactionally oriented. We are looking at data across 10 years of history, across multiple agencies and types of tools, so they collect that information and their focus is different. And we have 3 counties that we're collecting data for, all of whom did not collect their data historically in the same way or at the same level of detail. So we spent a lot of time over the last several months working with our consulting team, researching in detail much of that data set to make sure that we had a good platform for the analysis. The other thing that I think that folks sometimes forget is that we really are effectively getting 3 different analyses in conjunction with this project. So we're doing an economic impact analysis, a geospatial analysis, and a systems analysis. And what those are going to attempt to do is tell us how much impact did we have from our incentives, where did it occur, and does our data collection and reporting system support our needs to be able to tell that story. So where we're at today is that we have completed our initial outreach, we've completed the data collection, we completed the data vetting. The consultants have done the actual analysis and run that information through their various models. And now they're in the process of compiling all that information into a document that outlines the findings from that research. Concurrently with that, we're also working with folks like the Office of Performance Management and the Office of Innovations to try and figure out how we can use this data going forward and how we can make it more readily accessible to the public going forward so that we don't have to do a 10-year look back, but this is something that we can potentially do on an ongoing basis. The draft document is currently been completed and is under professional review. We are having actually a meeting of the steering committee this afternoon to have a conversation with our consultants, and the current schedule is anticipating a rollout of the actual final report in mid-May. What we see the impact of this study being is that it will really help broaden our understanding of the historic use of incentives in Kansas City. But as always, sometimes the process is one of the major benefits, and I think that this process will significantly increase our knowledge around collection, management, and reporting of data, which we need to understand so that we can have a transparent and accountable process for economic development incentives. Also, along the way, this project has availed us of the opportunity to interact with other cities, and so we've had multiple opportunities to interact with other cities like Cincinnati, Philadelphia, San Jose, that are also endeavoring to try and better understand incentives and collaborate with them and understand how we can broaden our collective understanding of economic development tools. And we're continuing to work on that, and we are have some upcoming opportunities, I think, with the health department where they're going to be learning about how this can be applied to other areas than just traditional economic developments. And so we're excited to be in a position to be able to say that we're very close to having the results of this long and worthwhile effort.
All right, thank you. We are 2 minutes past my first milestone. Just saying. All right, up next, we will look at Objective 2, implement strategies to promote social and economic well-being of city residents. First strategy under that is how we are assisting small businesses. So, Rick, John?
I'll talk first and fast, and then turn it over to Rick. Let's see, our slide that's up there, which is number 17 on mine. One of the things you'll notice is that actually the number of our total clients has started to decrease. I think that's actually a good thing in the sense that we are co-located, as you may know, with the Business License Office. And so for the first several years of our existence, we derived a lot of our customer interactions from people that came in to get a business license. The finance department has been very successful with their online platform, and so we're seeing fewer people walk into the office, which is good because they're registering their business license online, which is more convenient for them, right? So that's a success. So one of the things that we're seeing is fewer people walk in the office, so we're realizing we have to get more proactive in getting out into the community because people still have the same kinds of questions about starting a business. They just don't necessarily show up at our doorstep. So April's going to be a pretty busy month for us. I spoke at an event, a small business event, Friday up north of the river. Tomorrow night I'll be at a networking event on Troost. We're going to be I'll be at the Small Business Roundtable at Main Core later this month. So we're going to be kind of shifting our focus to try and hopefully take advantage of the Compass KC, which will help us integrate and do more of our information available on our website so that we can get out more. So when we talk to clients, what do we do? Let me give you a couple quick examples of what that means. I had a gentleman come talk to me a couple weeks ago, a little bit of an older gentleman, retired from Missouri State Agency, had a lot of construction expertise. He wants to start coordinating as a general contractor. So he wasn't quite ready. I mean, this is sometimes the conversation I have with people. You're not quite ready to get the business license because you've got some work to do. I suggested he sit down with an attorney and take a good look at organizing his business structure. Suggested he take one of the human relations workshops on becoming a MBE, which he actually did. And then he came back to my office. At that point, we got a business license. I also helped him connect with a QuickBooks class because he has to learn about accounting. So that's one example. Had a guy at my desk yesterday who's been kind of had a side hustle business. He's got a main job, and he's got a side hustle business as a lawn contractor.
It's just funny to hear you say side hustle. I'm sorry, it's totally destroyed your image.
That may be the first time in Casey Stat that phrase has been used, so let's mark that
Yeah,
down.
okay, maybe
Yeah,
I
by
should use it
John
more
Page
because
or
frankly,
all
that's what a lot of people, they come to us when they're doing something that's not full-time, that they
No, I
want to
like
take
side
full-time.
hustle. It was just funny to hear it coming
Right.
from you.
Okay, so,
We're taking
Even
it
your
to the
shirt is
streets.
buttoned down.
yeah. So maybe I need to throw the tie off and just,
Put on your leather.
I'll have to buy some. So this gentleman is ready to really grow his lawn care business, which he's been doing unofficially for a while. So, okay, let's talk about that. So he really wanted to bid on a parks project, so I called a friend of mine over in Parks who helps people who said, okay, here's what we need from this guy. We need him to get a business license, we need him to get insurance, and we need him to get some commercial equipment. So we helped him get the business license, we connected him with a microloan program so he can get some commercial equipment, and then I connected him with some other resources, again, to kind of help do the business management part of his job. So that's kind of the people that we engage, and I think we're kind of interwoven with a lot of the other work that's been talked about here, the Central City economic development stuff, which we're trying to get out in the community and tell people about the resources available to them. So
Who's telling this story? Who's telling this story? People in this room know it. Anybody that's watching TV might have heard it. Other than that, who's telling this story? Because this is something you do all the time, correct?
Well, we worked with City Communications last month. They did a great video for us that got some pretty good traction on Facebook. We are going to be featured in the We Create report that SourceLink is doing later this year. And we've got a couple ads we're running, but I'm always open to suggestions on how we can get the word out a little better.
He's all over the Facebook and the Twitter, too.
Mm-hmm.
The Twitter? You should know better.
I'll let Rick talk about some of the shop local initiatives that he's been working on,
I would
too.
say, I don't think John's hustle gets talked about enough. As you just heard, the amount of phone calling and hustling and running things down, I think his office, John and his staff do an amazing job.
And that's kind of my point. And there's more people that are abandoning Facebook. I never watch Facebook or look at Facebook. The arguments are way too long. And I'm tired of seeing, and when I do look at it, to see somebody post pictures of their cat chasing a squirrel or something, it's crazy. But there, there really does need to be a focus on putting the story out about what you're doing, because what you're doing is very valuable. And there's a lot of people who simply don't know about it and don't know about BizCare. We need to do a better job of getting that word out. And so you can do more of those types of things. So just sitting here, you've told us about 2 people who were able to get their business started with your help and get into a business position. There's a lot of people out there that like to know about that, and I'm not sure that they do. So we'll think of something.
Thank you.
Yep. So just
I'll make it my side hustle.
and a little bit more about John and his amazing growth in this implementation of KC BizCare. In 2009, we were putting this together. Everybody I talked to in town says, "Do you know John Pajor?" So, I shanghaied him initially from city planning, and now he's in the city manager's office. And he's learning social media. He's been a pro at it for quite a while. The business outreach initiatives, a little to follow in a little more deeply. Small business focus groups it's a program we implemented a few years back that John and I will coordinate a focus group meeting facilitated by a business association. So we've worked with the Prospect Business Association, Independence Avenue, Main Core, and they then invite 8 or 10 business owners, and then we get really hyper-local information on what's affecting their business, their ability to thrive. A lot of what we deal with in these meetings, and we've actually got some good feedback on this, is we'll get tagged after the meeting in social media. Hey, I got this pothole in front of my party shop, and Public Works goes out and fixes that pothole. The owner went out, put it on Facebook Live. Look at this, the city's filling my pothole. We had a small business focus group meeting with this kind of emerging maker movements along 31st Street. And in that meeting, the owners of El Torreon Ballroom talked about leaning telephone poles and lighting they needed in their parking lot. So they were able to connect with Kansas City Power and Light. Power and Light went out and fixed those leaning street light poles. So really what John's demonstrating to you is this concept of growing entrepreneurs, working with KC SourceLink and other organizations. We have just a tremendous resource at KC SourceLink that is going nationwide through US SourceLink, and we're fortunate to have them in Kansas City. The second item here, office hours at KC Public Library. For about 2 years, we've been holding this third Monday of the month, 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 3 to 5 p.m. at Bluford Library, 31st and Prospect. This really started up about the time the Prospect Business Association appeared, and it's this idea of taking City Hall outside of downtown. We can't afford to staff field offices, but through this office hours program, we go out and we meet some interesting people, and we help them move their businesses forward. Shop Local Roundtable, I'll talk about that more in a few slides later here. And then the collaborations with Mid-Continent Library, Kansas City Public Library, IRS on workshops. Those, John, you really facilitated more of those meetings. You want to cover the last 2 bullets here?
Right, so again, things are changing, right? So we're getting a lot more people asking us about starting an e-commerce business. So for Global Entrepreneurship Week last season, we collaborated with the Mid-Continent Public Library and the KCMO Public Library, which I thought was kind of amazing. We got 2 library systems together. And we, between the 3 of us, brought in an expert panel on e-commerce, which was a very well-attended workshop that we did. We'll probably do it again next year. So we're always looking for opportunities like that to kind of do more than we can with our limited resources by partnerships. And then Finance Department, this week, they've changed some of their policies on how they regulate food trucks. So They actually went out into the community, and we helped facilitate that to actually meet with some of the food truck drivers, walk them through the system. So kind of thanks to them for being willing to get out of the building and go out and meet people where they are.
All right, Launch KC.
Launch KC is a startup grant program that we at the EDC run in conjunction with the Downtown Council of Kansas City. Our third year class is seated, if you will, right now, operating, and we just opened the application for the fourth year class. This is an international, excuse me, it's international grant competition. We typically get 400 to 500 applications each year. We go through a selection process. We have a number of business people throughout the community who volunteer time to help in the evaluation of all the applications. And basically what we're looking for each year are the 10 companies that are closest to being ready to really start being a company. They have some financing, they have a product, they have the ability to sell the product, and they're ready to go to market. And we select 10 grant winners each year. Each of those grant winners gets a $50,000 grant, and it doesn't dilute their ownership. We don't take any ownership in the startup company. It's truly a grant to them. They're provided free workspace. We have a number of companies in Kansas City that volunteer the space for us for a year. We have a whole series of mentors throughout the business community, also with the Kauffman Foundation and their entrepreneurial efforts that help mentor these companies through the startups. Some of the law firms do special seminars on all sorts of the elements that these creative entrepreneurs have to know in order to run their businesses successfully. As I mentioned, our third class, the class of 2017, is sort of seated in their space right now. We've started the class of 2018 application process, but we wanted to kind of go back a little bit and see how this program is working and what kind of success we've had. So this slide shows the first 2 years worth of the grant winners. And you can see the employment is now up to 92 employees from the original 38. Their aggregate sales have increased by $4.6 million over a 2-year total. Of the 17 of those companies are still in Kansas City, Missouri, which is another one of the goals that we wanted, not only to get them started here, but to try and get them to stay here. Average salary, you can see it's grown quite a bit for the initial class in comparison to what the average salary is for the first year class, and I think as the companies grow and expand, those salaries raise. Projected payroll is over $5 million, so it's doubled just in the last year. And one of the other stats, it's not on a slide, but we wanted to talk about was we have received annually a grant from the Missouri Technology Corporation to support this program in the amount of $250,000 each year. We would never have been able to get this off the ground without the Missouri Technology Corporation's support, and so I want to take this opportunity to thank them. But we also do a pretty significant amount of private fundraising in Kansas City with companies that support this activity and support the entrepreneur and startup community. We also get some financial support from the city of Kansas City. So we wanted to see if this was really going to be worth it for the entities that are helping invest with us. So far, on the class of 2015, the first class that we have 2 years worth of metrics on now, the city's got a 311% rate of return on the money they've invested in the Launch KC program. If you go in and look at the earnings taxes and the other local tax revenue that's been generated in comparison to the city's investment. The state of Missouri, I mentioned the Missouri Technology Corporation's given us large grants. So far, state revenue, they've seen 145% return on the investments they've made. So this is a program that's not only generating jobs for people, but is also generating tax revenue. And since we have to do an annual fundraising, I wanted to get that return numbers out there.
Good
All
idea.
right, great,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Bob. All right, we're gonna need to pick up the pace, folks.
Oh.
Rick?
Time.
You're much,
So the
You're
the
much
Shop
stronger
Local
than Julie.
KC program, our main partner again there is KC SourceLink. They have a Shop Local KC page where you can register your business, put your business online. They go through the process of confirming that it is actually a locally owned business. And in December, we started a Shop Local KC Roundtable where we invite business associations from around the city, those organizations that are helping, in the KC SourceLink's term, the Main Street businesses, the mom and pops, the storefronts that are creating the vibrant, shopping districts we have in the city. And they're sharing ideas and they're sharing their experiences. So we have like Main Core, which is highly organized. They've got a very strong business association. They've got a CID. And then we'll have, say, Prospect Business Association, which just formed. They have a business association. They're in the conversation of forming a CID. The other I mentioned earlier is this 31st Street Maker Village concept. They are really just now a group of business owners talking about how they improve their neighborhood, how they make their neighborhood more walkable. So you get them all in the room and they're able to share their experiences and help them grow more quickly. So we're doing that Shop Local Roundtable every other month. We're initially just trying to get everybody around the social media use of hashtag ShopLocalKC, promoting their business, have their customers use that in social media, and then telling the story of how spending your dollar locally keeps more of that dollar in the Kansas City economy, and that the employment that brings to the neighborhoods is very significant. In the off month, we have a smaller focus group meeting in different neighborhoods around the city. So we'll be holding another roundtable here in April.
All right, strategy D takes us over to the business-to-business mentorship.
So in 2013, the city codified the mentor protege program in City Code 130041. But the implementation didn't actually start to get off the ground until about 2015 when we developed our program after the Missouri Department of Transportation program, which is the DBE Mentor Protege Program. Currently, we're working with some of the other departments to implement it, and the whole purpose is to increase the economic impact in the urban areas. But the majority of our businesses that need the mentorship is the MBE, WBE, or SLBE. Any of the acronyms that we deal with, they need that mentorship. So this is really what it was designed for. We encourage any business to be able to participate into it. Right now, we've had challenges getting major companies to participate. They inquire, but they don't necessarily apply. And so we wanted to get the word out more about what the program is and what the requirements are. What it is that the mentor would apply to the city of Kansas City, Missouri Human Relations Department through our application, which legal department helped us put together back in 2015. It's a pretty robust application, about 12 pages. It is a commitment, and I think that's where our majority firms get a little bit hung up because the mentors can have no more than 3 proteges at a time, but it's a commitment of at least 3 years, but no more than 5. And that's in the actual ordinance. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring it here today is there are some challenges with the program.
Frankly, if it's so hard for them to get into it, then doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose?
I would say that that is a council question because it is legislatively driven of how it is designed. So for us, we just implement the program. We put out what the parameters are. Part of the reason why it is stringent is because we want to ensure that MBEs or any of those acronym firms stay pure, that they do retain the ownership and control and management of their company. So I would say I would throw it back to a legislative issue as opposed to an actual implementation issue. If we can get the codification of slightly modified, it may make it easier and more worthwhile.
Well, maybe we'll have to change the chair of the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee. But when process becomes an impediment to success, then the process needs to be evaluated. It doesn't make any sense to have a process so stringent that it's not meeting the basic goal. I don't know what pure means. I don't know if there's been evidence that something in the process was added in order to stop something that had happened, or if it's a preemptive strike. But, you know, just to have a program that makes it difficult for the people that you need to participate seems to defeat the purpose. That does need to be looked into. It doesn't make any sense to do it like that. And the issue of purity, it is what it is. I don't know how you change that or what the process does to ensure it. But if it's so bad if the process is so bad trying to ensure purity that you don't get the mentorship, which means you don't get the development of the MBWBE firms, I'm not sure what good the process is.
Our evaluation from USDOT and Missouri DOT is that they don't have the minimum number of year requirement. It's in our ordinance that makes that minimal and maximal. So I think that can clear up some of the process if we look at it from a legislative standpoint.
Okay.
And then the other thing is that we have a committee that then reviews the applications and meets with the mentor and proteges, if necessary, quarterly to ensure that the program is going along as it needs to. And the next slide is just a sample of how the program would actually work.
Have you surveyed the companies who have applied and then decided, or who have inquired and then decided not to, as to why they didn't follow through?
Yes, the biggest stick there was the number of years they had to be in the business.
All right. You mean they had to
Yes,
mentor?
mentor for
Okay.
3 years.
Okay. All right.
And the next slide, again, it's just what it would actually look like if you have the mentor protege relationship. There are 4 areas that the ordinance actually allows for, and that's technical assistance, managerial advice, bonding assistance, and financial assistance.
All right, we'll record that as a follow-up item to circle back on the process and look at the survey results.
All right.
All right, thank you. All right, strategy E, develop a plan that defines paths for economic mobility.
Okay. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So traditionally, when we talk about economic development, and a lot of the information that we've reported today is really focused around place-based or prosperity-based economic development strategies. So real estate or what neighborhood revitalization efforts are underway, businesses, what expansion of business operations is underway, how are we supporting small businesses. But one of the factors related to economic development that we don't think about enough, but that is inextricably connected to our efforts is that which benefits individual people. So the concept of triple bottom line economic development is something that we wanted to introduce to sort of tee up our conversation about economic mobility today, because we want to make sure that we are putting an equal amount of focus on individuals and their prosperity, as well as the other pieces of our economic development strategy because it's essential that all three of those have to be addressed for us to be able to have a successful economic development process in our community. So one of the goals from this year was for the community to create a plan that defines paths to economic mobility for residents. And so to start this process off, we formed an internal task force of multiple departments comprised of the health department, the planning department, the EDC, the housing department. I believe the Office of Performance Management is also involved in that conversation. The Office of Creative Cultural Services involved in it. And we'll get to a slide here in a minute that explains why all of these people are at the table. But we've been meeting since late 2017, and basically what our role is to research the issue of economic mobility and try to provide some information that then we'll present to council so that can help to inform their future policy discussions about an economic mobility strategy for the city. So our areas of focus as part of that due diligence process to date have been an evaluation of existing plans and how they relate to economic mobility, the types of economic mobility and influencers. We've looked at some research on the cost of segregation. We've looked at how the financial health of residents intersects with this issue and with traditional economic development. And we've begun to look at qualitative indicators of social cohesion and economic mobility in Kansas City. All of this will be important foundational knowledge, but public input will also be a key component in this process for determining strategies. So our planning approach, go back one slide, has been really to build from existing efforts and then to utilize this research that we're doing and the national best practices that are out there to really help us frame the issue of economic mobility. We want this to be something that is measurable so that as we implement strategies, then we have the ability to see what the impacts of those efforts result in, and then we want to be able to engage the community. So kind of the first part of that process was an evaluation of our existing plans. And basically what this slide shows is that there are a multitude of different planning and strategic efforts that exist in our community today that center around various issues that intersect with economic mobility, such as education, housing, public safety, culture, the economy, health, etc. But that if those planning efforts exist in silos, they actually impede the city's ability to move forward on a transformative initiative like an economic mobility plan, and that we lose kind of our perspective and our focus on the individual. That was actually a recommendation that came out of the Advanced KC strategic plan and really talks about the importance of coordinating and adopting more of a social planning model for things centered around economic development. So let's talk a little bit about what is economic mobility. Economic mobility is the ability of an individual, family, or some other group to improve their economic status. So we look at this in two ways. We look at relative and absolute mobility. So what we're looking at is the ability of an individual to be able to move up in their economic prosperity within their own lifetime, in their own circumstances. And then we also want to look at it over a longer period of time and how that translates into intergenerational wealth. So we have a quick video that we wanted to share with you just to illustrate a little bit better this concept.
Economic mobility is the ability to move up and down the income ladder during one's lifetime and across generations. So having an understanding of economic mobility is therefore having an understanding of the health and status of the American dream. There are two ways of measuring economic mobility. The first is absolute, which looks at upward and downward changes in income over time. When we look at absolute mobility in the United States, we see a glass that is half full. This is because the vast majority of Americans have higher incomes in inflation-adjusted dollars than their parents did at the same age. And that's true across the income distribution. In terms of absolute mobility, the American dream is doing quite well. The second measure of economic mobility is relative, which is concerned with a person's rank within the income distribution as a whole. By this measure, we see a glass half empty, because many Americans, especially those at the top and bottom of the income ladder, are unlikely to experience relative mobility. Of those whose parents were in the bottom fifth of the income distribution, about 40% remain in the bottom themselves as adults. Similarly, of those whose parents were in the top fifth of the income distribution, about 40% remain in the top themselves. We call this phenomenon stickiness at the ends, because those at the ends of the income distribution are stuck there across generations. By this measure of mobility, the American dream is struggling. So what this means is that a person can experience upward absolute mobility, having more income, but not upward relative mobility, not moving out of the bottom. For example, if a family grows richer over time, but at a slower rate than many other families, they can experience upward absolute mobility at the same time they experience downward relative mobility. This is kind of like an escalator. If everyone is moving up, everyone experiences upward absolute mobility. But if people don't change positions on the escalator as it's moving, those who began at the bottom remain at the bottom, even as they grow richer. Now imagine a second escalator. People are moving up, experiencing upward absolute mobility. A person gets on at the bottom and begins walking up the stairs, passing people on the escalator ahead of him. He is experiencing upward absolute mobility and upward relative mobility. Pew's Economic Mobility Project thus believes that both measures of mobility, absolute and relative, are important for having a complete picture of economic mobility in America. Neither perspective should be taken in isolation from the other. The project has identified a series of factors, including education, savings, and neighborhood poverty, that influence economic mobility. To learn more about these indicators and to read our reports, visit economicmobility.org.
So based on research by the Pew Foundation and other research organizations that are out there evaluating this issue of economic mobility, we know that there are a variety of factors that help or hinder an individual's ability to be able to move upwards in that economic ladder. That includes your level of education, what neighborhood you live in, how much savings your family has available to deal with emergencies and to meet daily household needs, the amount of relative wealth that you have today or have the ability to compile over your lifetime, what your household expenditures are relative to your amount of income and relative to the other residents in and around your community, what your income capacity is for the future, but also things that you really can't influence and that you just are, born with, and that is things like race and gender, and then what family structure you're born into. But there are strategies and policies that can be applied that help to remove these barriers or to provide resources to individuals to help them take advantage of influencers that can assist them in moving up the mobility ladder. So one of the issues that we took a look at in a little bit more depth was in regards to income and race. And that was an effort to just kind of try and see where Kansas City is relative to these issues. The Urban Institute completed a study called the Cost of Segregation, and I think it's now 2 years old, which looked at 100 commuting zones across the city and looked at what their relative levels of economic and racial segregation were as compared to other cities across the country. And although those rankings have changed over time, Kansas City, in terms of how we fit in nationally, we are the fifth most economically segregated community currently in those 100 commuting cities. We rank 26th in terms of black-white racial segregation and 29th in Latino-white segregation, according to that research. And so what this chart shows is what that change is over time for each one of those indicators, but then also what it would what we would need to do in terms of a change to get ourselves to a median level of segregation in each of those three areas. And that's important because segregation has an actual economic cost to us as a community. So when we have segregation, it not only impacts the individuals and their ability to be able to access resources, but it also puts pressures on the community in terms of lost opportunity costs and also the cost of services that folks have to access in order to compensate for the lack of resources that they have. And so the Urban Institute looked at those indicators and tried to correlate them with factors to see how they might be impacting the economics of broader communities. And what they found is that economic segregation is correlated with lower median and per capita income for Blacks, for less educational attainment and a likelihood to attain a bachelor's degree among Blacks. It is correlated with life expectancy that is slightly longer in areas with more inequality, but shorter in areas with higher percentage of whites, and is in general correlated with life expectancy increases. Racial segregation for Blacks and whites is correlated with also lower per capita income from Blacks and less educational attainment for Blacks, but is also correlated with higher homicide rates. And then Latino white segregation is actually associated with lower homicide rates. So what are the implications of that for Kansas City? What that tells us is that there are opportunities for us to increase the economic resources available to the broader community through increased per capita and median income for Blacks in our community, and also to increase educational attainment, which then also is related to those increases in educational attainment. But then also because racial segregation is a factor that influences economic segregation, we could potentially expect to see decreases in homicide rates if we as a community could lower our economic and our racial segregation.
Okay. Did she take all my time? Okay.
You've got a couple seconds. Yeah.
2 seconds. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Well done.
Let's do that. This is where the data comes in. I'm really excited. My name is Sarah. I'm Deputy Director of the Health Department. The Health Department is really honored to be the owner agency in the business plan of the Path to Economic Mobility. And mostly it's because we love convening people. So what I'm going to show you on these slides is really our definition. We have to start somewhere. So if you could go back one slide, we have to start somewhere defining what do we mean by success. And I have to really give it to the Office of Performance Management has really been adaptable in thinking how we can ask residents things that are going to tell us whether what we're doing is making an impact. And that means a lot as city staff to be able to follow that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about financial health and how we define that compared to our economic peer cities. And that's an Urban Institute study that came out. So this is looking at more than income. And I think we cannot say it enough that economic mobility is about wealth generation and transfer across generations and building that up over time. So we know if we look at the highest income people in the city, and we took a Black resident who makes over $250,000 and a white resident who makes over $250,000, and we compared their wealth, right? So that's going to be their assets minus their debt. So like, for instance, me, like I'm negative wealth because of all my student loans. So we look at those two people and we say, let's look at their wealth. And so for every dollar of white wealth in the highest income bracket, our Black residents have about 5 or 6 cents to the dollar. And this is among people who make a lot of money. So we focus a lot on income. We don't focus a lot of the conversation on wealth, and that's what we're trying to change the narrative about. So when we look at credit score, for instance, we know that blue bar is us. So our average credit score is 552 in our non-white areas of the city, and that is lower than both our peer cities and significantly lower than the national average, which is the black bar. So these are the kinds of measures we're looking at. Delinquent debt, right? A higher percentage of our folks have that. We are doing very good in our unbanking And I know there's a lot of initiatives around that. We only have 5% of people who are unbanked in the metro, but I know that if you go into certain areas of the city and of the metro, that number doubles or triples. And we're having a lot of initial conversations with local banks about how we fix that. And then we look at that median debt is a lot higher here in Kansas City, and that is over the entire city, not broken apart. So Carrie's done a good job of making inroads with partners potentially where we can get some really localized data to back this up. And so hopefully by the next time we meet, we'll be able to get some more local data. So we can move to the citizen or the resident survey questions that we're going to focus on are around the economic mobility. So this is how our people are actually doing. One of my favorite questions is probably the next one that you'll see, which is, are you better off than your parents were? Now, do we have IRS income right now to link it? No. Will we one day? If we do our job right, yes. So that we could actually see how people are doing. But the perception of how you're doing versus your parents is really important from a health perspective. Like, we've given up on the American dream in our lowest income bracket. So you'll notice that in that bracket, 19 plus 12%, right, are somewhat worse or much worse than their parents were. And that there's a linear relationship. So if you're up at the highest income, you're thinking you're doing a lot better than your parents were. The next slide is going to look at that by race, which is interesting because we know that in this city, race and income are highly correlated, but we don't see a relationship between race and the likelihood that you're going to feel better off. And there are a lot of pockets of the city where we see, decreasing life expectancy, decreasing wealth and health in our poor white areas of the city. And so we have to be very attentive to those areas as well in the conversation. The next slide is about, can you just meet your needs by council district? And we see that third council district, we have 38% who would rate that as fair or poor, their ability to meet their needs. Next Monday, I will give a preview that we're going to be digging in a little more on health data and this kind of stuff at the third district community meeting and presenting that on April 9th at the Urban Youth Academy. So everyone is welcome to come and see us dig in a little more to that council district. Oh, one more. And this is the ability to meet needs by race, where we do see a difference. So, this is illuminating the difference between income and wealth and what it means across generations and how the recommendations that we come up with out of this group are going to be focused on both short-term, gains across your lifetime, but also focused on the long game, generational wealth transfer and making sure that people are transferring wealth that isn't susceptible to going away, right? So we know that the majority of people of color, their wealth is tied up in home ownership. And if that tanks, so does their wealth. And so we have to figure out some alternative methods for that. That's that. Thank you.
All right, moving on, digital equity.
Thank you. The Digital Equity Strategic Plan is just a year old now, and we've had success in implementation. Last summer through the Higher KC Youth Program, we had 2 interns that assisted us in developing the beginnings of this community learning center network. We're identifying places within walking distance for Kansas City, Missouri school district students to complete their homework. We know from the school district that 70% of their students don't have internet at home, so we're trying to make that as accessible as we can, while we're also working on helping them get computers and internet access at home. We held the Digital Inclusion Awareness Day, July 15th. Last fall, we held a Google Fiber Community Connections Challenge, and we're able to connect 34 nonprofits across the city engaged in digital inclusion to one degree or another. We connected a number of the city's CAN centers, and these organizations now have free gigabit service to provide their services. Our partnership with Surplus Exchange and the Digital Upcycling Program has led to the construction of 3 community learning centers. They installed computers and furniture at Morningstar Family Life Center, at Calvary Church, and at Asteam Village. all organizations that are helping people get access to the internet. We were designated a e-digital equity partner in January. Through that program, it's just additional recognition of our digital upcycling program and the city's participation in digital equity across the city. Chris Hernandez, our communications director, is a digital inclusion fellow with the Nonprofit Technology Network. The Digital Inclusion Fellowship Program is a program that N10 started with Google several years back to work with cities and organizations on digital inclusion efforts. And we continue our participation with the Kansas City Coalition for Digital Inclusion. I'm on the steering committee. And we've got other staff, Parks and Rec and Health, that regularly attend these events. Really where we just came from on economic mobility, digital equity is hand in glove with that so much of our economy today is based on the internet, and helping our residents get access and understand the value of being online is critical of that success. And then there's two, actually I didn't put the other one on here, next week at the National Technology Network Conference, McLean Bryant and I, and maybe another from Kansas City, will be giving a panel discussion of the implementation of the coalition in Kansas City. And then at the Net Inclusion Summit in Cleveland, and 2 weeks later, more conversation with our peers across the country.
All right, and I think Eric's going to cover the
Yeah, Eric
data.
Roche, Chief Data Officer for the City of Kansas City, Missouri. I've got 4 quick points to make from our resident survey that help us know about internet access in Kansas City, Missouri. So we know that in our elderly population, they have less access to the internet. But we did see a jump recently, so far this fiscal year, that our eldest population, 65 years old plus, that actually has gone up. They've seen an increase in internet access. So that's good to see, and we certainly hope we can maintain that going forward. However, other trends still hold true. We know that internet access decreases with income, especially for those that make under $30,000 a year. We know that a large race and ethnicity gap exists between people who identify as white and people who identify as other races or ethnicities in Kansas City. And we know that there's a geographic component to this as well, where 3rd District has much lower access to the internet than our other council districts.
Okay, that provides our motivation to keep working on this particular strategy. All right.
Is the 3rd district low rate tied to income
It's definitely related.
and
all
perhaps
three of
and
these.
age?
Yeah,
Yeah.
these are all
And race.
interrelated.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, strategy B, about 5 to 7 minutes.
I can do that. Megan Krager, Office of Culture and Creative Services. Mainly because what came out of the arts market study has already been reported, I'm happy to say, so I'm only going to touch on the high points. What we learned from the arts market study, which was conducted by ArtSpace, a nonprofit developer out of Minneapolis, was kind of the types of creative spaces that are needed to pursue creative endeavors here in Kansas City. It also helped us to define what does affordability mean for our creatives locally, and then why it's important that we have some focus on creative space as our city grows. The arts market study was open to individual artists, arts organizations, creative businesses, and I want to mention that it was throughout the region. And we also learned that about 30% of individual artists, as well as businesses and organizations, came from outside of the city. So I think that gives us some evidence that we do have an ability to attract creatives to our city through development and cultivation of affordable and functional creative spaces. Some of the takeaways are the types of spaces that are needed or desired that are both functional and affordable. That it is an attractor. For individuals, we learned that the highest demand is around housing, live, workspace, with an ability to pay between $400 to $800 per month. And for businesses and organizations, the interest was in short-term rental as the highest need. We also learned through the study that 47% of interested respondents' household incomes are at or below 60% of the AMI for Kansas City. And so while we understand there's a greater community housing need, I think what that tells us is the need to tap into existing housing policies and planning initiatives that are currently ongoing. Next slide. So we have been in partnership with the EDC, working with ArtSpace to try to locate the right property for a single development that could start to meet some of those needs. So on the left, out of the study, came the recommendations from the report. And the first one, of course, is to look at a single development. And with the idea to support the creative sector of the low-income creative community and ensure their long-term presence here in the city, and to help stabilize some of the small businesses. So they were looking for a property with up to 60 units with live work, 40 units of private studio work, and 2,000 to 3,000 square feet of creative commercial, co-working, and shared market space on the retail level. But we have discovered that there are far more factors beyond just the market demand that is informing the feasibility of such a development, like funders' priorities, civic leadership priorities, the site opportunities, and some of their restrictions. Ironically enough, there just aren't any affordable properties at the moment for ArtSpace to consider. So at this time, we've sort of exhausted that possibility and are looking at the next recommendations of local training, real estate associations and developers about this opportunity as sort of a volunteer basis to incorporate it into their developments. And then we will continue to look for opportunities to have shared creative tenant space. So this is kind of an ongoing effort. But on the right, as these recommendations have been made, we also want to kind of tick off what we know are helping to meet this goal. So, for example, the Pendleton Arts Block, which is happening because with the Choice HUD grant with the Paseo Gateway District, is going to have 38 units of new construction mid-rise buildings with efficiencies and 1-2 bedrooms that are live work. And so knowing that it's not all dedicated to creatives, we know that that helps to get us to that goal. One thing that hasn't been talked about a lot, but I think it's worth celebrating, is the developer Brinshaw's are also providing retail level space for creatives and is currently working with Charlotte Street Foundation and their new startup residency program to provide 12 months of free storefront space to run their collaborative. And I know one of the organizations is a startup film production company. They'll also be providing mentoring and networking and cross-marketing, and that's at the top. On the bottom, you'll see also worth recognizing is Kansas City Young Audiences found their new home on Main Street, and it not only provides rehearsal space and performance and education programs, but also space for rent for other organizations to use for those same purposes. At the same time, Charlotte Street Foundation is losing their 10-year space of Paragraph Gallery at 10th and Walnut, so we know that this will continue to be a trend as affordability gets to be more difficult. From the policy perspective, looking at also what's been accomplished, definitely want to recognize the renewal of the PIAC for the Crossroads Arts District. And then most recently with the Central City Tax District, I've learned they have expressed an interest in the Creative Corridor, in a creative corridor as part of their larger plan. So I'm happy to work with my city colleagues on how we can be a resource to help making that happen. One of the outcomes of this objective of the city business plan was, it used to be identifying the creative space needs and developing a plan. That has since dropped off, and so we can now say that this objective is complete. However, I also want to point out that one of the long-term ideas was kind of generating what the tools and strategies might be available both here locally, but on a national level that we can implement here that would be specific to neighborhoods. While PIA works great for Crossroads, it may not necessarily work for every neighborhood, and so it's about being specific to their needs. And as I was thinking about this kind of tool handbook, Seattle beat us to it. I'm sorry to say, but happy to say that we have kind of a model that we can look at, which is the CAP report, 30 Ideas for the Creation, Activation, and Preservation of Cultural Spaces. I think it's a great starting point for conversation. So for the next slide, you'll see, I wanted to also mention, while the plan is no longer, developing a plan is no longer part of the subjective, we will continue to think about ways to ensure this stays on the radar in various aspects of the city. You're seeing here on the right a picture of one of our Office of Culture Creative Services coffee shop office hours inspired by our BizCare colleagues. Which really started out of the conversation of Open Spaces, our new citywide festival that will launch this August. And we've had probably over 60 people in attendance. It happens every Friday, every week for the past 3 months. The top 3 topics of interest and discussion is obviously open spaces, because we continue to have calls that come out for artists, for makers, for architects, for creative partnerships. The second area of interest is then funding. And so this is a time when we're also sharing the Artist Microloan Program, the Neighborhood Tourist Development Fund. We always provide them access to BizCare. We're sending them your way, John, Casey SourceLink. And then on a couple of occasions, just the ability to sign up with the city as a vendor to know that there are possibilities for contracts and for services and products. But the third thing I want to mention is the need for various types of spaces to do their creative work. Had an artist come in talking about the need for a temporary oversized space because they're working on a proposal for a large painting. A theater space in the Northland is very scarce. A couple of theater artists saying that there's no space to actually rent theater room on a temporary basis. So these are just some ongoing, anecdotal, I guess you would say, information that I'm collecting. And what I've put here on the left are just, again, some brainstorm ideas, but at this point, we will need direction to ensure that we're using our resources properly. But the idea of facilitating use of existing city facilities, particularly the parkland, community centers, cultural centers. I'll be meeting with Anna Marie in a couple of weeks to explore this further. And this comes directly out of Advanced KC Economic Development Strategic Plan, encouraging arts use. And if we can do that in an affordable way for these purposes, that would be great. And then, as I mentioned earlier, ensuring artists and creatives are part of city planning initiatives, and particularly Committee on Affordable Housing. And then thinking about the comprehensive plan, zoning and land uses, and exploring types. It sort of was going to come out of the cultural asset mapping. What do we have and what do we not have? And what does the community desire, that we can think about those things as we go into the comprehensive plan process. And then, starting from scratch, if we need to, think about a coalition to consider long-term and long-range solutions for affordability of functional spaces, that would be an option as well. But as of now, we consider the subjective complete.
Good, thanks. Super.
All right, objective 5, we have 40 minutes and 4 topics, so divide wisely. All right, strategy E is in TDF.
Oh, this is me, yeah. So it looks like this showed up on the business plan. It's very exciting to get to report out on this. It's very brief. We started collecting data 2 years ago, primarily on the front end from our applications, but then also on the final reporting end. So what I'm showing you here is a snapshot from the last completed fiscal year, 2017-2018. The demand, meaning this is what the nonprofit organizations are requesting from the city of support, and that amount was over $5 million, $5.27 million. And I want to note that that was an increase from the year prior of $4.6 million. So we're seeing an increase in request of funding. Last year, the annual funding appropriation actually decreased by 25%. The total appropriation was 1.5 million. But what was awarded last year was 1.6 million. So we were able, that might look funny because we exceeded the appropriation, but that is because the actual revenue came in higher than what was projected. And so we had a little more to spend. But we're seeing an increase in the number of funded projects, 11% increase. Also, I think pretty significant increase in number of applications over the past 2 years, about a 19, almost 20% increase. And we're seeing new applicants. We're doing applicant workshops throughout the entire city in the summer from June to September. We've seen 16 new applicants, meaning 16 new events that we're able to promote and support. But you can see on the right, the graph, a pretty significant increase in the total number of contracts that we are managing, because you can be any organization and come multiple times in a cycle over multiple cycles currently as it is written, because we're very generous in making sure that funding is available and out. We're also seeing, as I mentioned, the increase in number of organizations funded. Next. We're also tracking kind of the ratio of local audiences versus tourist audiences. The local we define as anyone living within the 6 council districts. And obviously then visitors include anyone outside of, so it could be someone coming from the Kansas side or Lee Summit. That is the, yeah. So we're breaking it to local or state and then national. So if you're coming from Kansas, that is a national data point. So we're looking at revising that to capture more local, regional, and then national, because I think that probably makes more sense here in our bi-state area. In 2018, it only reflected 53%. Oh, let me say, it looks like our local residents are actually, is that right, increasing, and our visitors are decreasing, but I want to point out that we only have 53% of the final reports in, because a lot of the activities are happening this current calendar year, fall, and into spring, and so we won't have the final data in until March, May, June, July, so we'll have a more complete picture there. Yeah.
Okay.
And then also, we're doing it by city council district. So as we expected, District 4 sees the bulk of the activity. Our goal is to make sure that organizations throughout the city know about this program, have access to the funding. We did see in this most recently completed year a pretty nice increase in District 5. However, we're still seeing a decrease in District 1 and 2. And so we need to do further exploratory to see why that is happening. It may be that they just are not in the area, or they're still lacking those resources to match the grants, or it may be lack of facilities and that they're actually producing events in other districts. And that's my report on NTDF, although you threw in the slide, which is an interesting correlation to what's being collected from the citizen satisfaction survey. Do you want to?
Yeah, so just quickly, we added a question, sort of an experiential question on the survey of have you, or how often have you, and we included several different things, including attended a cultural event, things like have you volunteered, have you had a neighbor over to your home. So this is just some preliminary data. We'll keep digging on this, but you can see there is a geographic component to have you attended a cultural event.
And my final slide, we haven't really reported this out, certainly not in this format, but the Neighborhood Tourist Development Committee is in their 3rd application cycle of implementing kind of a national best practice of utilizing eligibility criteria, which we broadly promote in the workshops and online, and then applying that to a formula. So really to the credit of the leadership of the committee in wanting to ensure a more transparent and consistent and equitable way of evaluating and awarding those organizations, we've now adopted this as part of the process. So, and it's going really well.
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Good. Thank you.
Next strategy up is airport.
Okay. And I'm a firm believer of on-time departures, so here we go. Councilman Taylor and Mr. Mayor, good to see you. Justin Meyer, Deputy Director with the Aviation Department, and pleased to provide an update today. Last update on the airport at KC Stat was in October, and we've made quite a few accomplishments towards this strategy and the plan to position our airport for the future. So happy to update you on those. Just looking quickly at the timeline where we are since our last KC Stat, of course, the successful election in November, which was a significant step in achieving this goal. In 2018, earlier this year, the MOU was signed. That was early February. And other items that are ongoing include the environmental assessment that we're doing with the FAA and the program validation on the facility, figuring out exactly what we'll need with our airline partners involved in that as well. There will be a 12 April updated business session that will certainly go into a little bit more detail on the current status and the schedule. So I encourage everyone to participate in that as they are able. One thing that was accomplished towards the end of last year was the developer, Edgemoor, hosted public workshops in every council district as well as in Johnson County, and also engaged several business organizations, chambers, and ADCs. Over 600 participants involved there, and again, the developer will be providing an update on this content at the 19 April Airport Committee meeting, so there'll be more details available there. To provide a little bit of an update on air service, in my 10 years of airline recruiting that I've been doing in my career, I've really not seen anything like what we've experienced here in the last 6 months. The growth that our airline partners have made towards Kansas City and the commitment they've made. So we've added 4 new airlines, 7 new nonstop destinations. That's actually 8 because just a few hours ago, Allegiant announced new nonstop flights to Myrtle Beach, and those begin in June of this year. So seasonal twice-weekly service to Myrtle Beach.
Good to know, Justin.
So there you go. So I'm still working on Louisville for you.
Thank you.
So in addition to the new nonstop maps, we've added new competition on existing routes such as Tampa, San Francisco, Cancun as well. So good competition is good for consumers and passengers, and we're encouraged to see that growth as well. Looking at some of the metrics that we keep track of through airline performance and flight schedule reports, we see 2 positive trends continuing, and those are tied to load factor, or the percentage of seats filled on an aircraft, as well as the seats per departure, and we've seen both of those continue to track in a positive direction. Load factor for all of our flights at KCI in 2017 was 81.3, which marks it as the 3rd fullest in an airport history. Aircraft gauge, or the number of seats we have per departure, is also increasing, and that's a result of seeing bigger airplanes using the facility. Those include Southwest Airlines upgauging to 737-800 aircraft, which has 175 seats. When Iceland Air launches next month, that'll be with a 183-seat aircraft, so bigger airplanes are the new normal for us. Of course, when load factor and larger aircraft are both trending up, it means passengers per departure is also trending up, and that number is now over 103, nearing 104 likely in 2018. And just to remind everyone that compares to 40 passengers per departure when our airport opened in 1972. More onboards means more crowded gates and more lines for restrooms and more people trying to go through security checkpoints at the same time. As we get to the citizen satisfaction survey, we'll see those scores continue to trend in the opposite direction from where we want to be. Looking at employments, 2008 has the potential to set an employment record. We had 11.5 million people in 2017 come through our airport, which is a 4.1% increase from the previous year. In terms of employments, we had 5.7 million last year. The record is 5.9 set in 2007. And if our growth rate continues this year as it did last year, 2018 will be the busiest year in the history of Kansas City International Airport. Looking at citizen satisfaction scores, again, these are trending in the wrong direction as they have continued to. all 4 categories of these are down in the questions that are asked on security, parking, food and beverage, as well as cleanliness. This is despite the fact that we've made significant investments over the last several years in the facility, and just in the last year, since the last KC Stat update, we've opened 2 new Starbucks, one inside American Airlines. We've added a new security checkpoint at American Airlines, which includes TSA PreCheck, which is a new amenity for passengers flying American. We've also expanded the restrooms, men's and women's restrooms, in the United Airlines gate area, and added a room for nursing mothers. So we're encouraged to continue to keep making improvements despite the fact that these scores trend down. As we flip to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what I think the real driver was for these scores going down, and that is that over the course of the last year, the aviation department's been engaged in over 40 community meetings where we've met with users and non-users of the airport and talked about what does work and what doesn't work at Kansas City International Airport. Additionally, there was a very effective campaign that was run to get that terminal vote to pass, and a lot of what the campaign was focused on was talking about the things that could be better and how the airport could work better. I think something that's really interesting on this graph that shows the significant decline in satisfaction, it actually shows that the non-flyers are more dissatisfied than the flyers. And I was just talking with Eric a few minutes ago. I think that's the first time that those two have flipped. And I believe what that would show is that the campaign effectively changed more minds of non-users than users themselves. Because typically the non-user of the airport has scored the airport more favorably than the user. This most recent data point shows the opposite.
It's always puzzled me how people who don't use something can be negative about it when they haven't used it. Although in this case, it works for me, so.
Okay, and that's the update from the airport. Again, a big update to the city council next week on the status of the process for the new terminal. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, takes us to Visit KC and tourism.
Good morning. I'm Corey Day with Visit KC. We have some information that we'd like to cover as far as where we ended 2017, since we have not been able to share that with anyone at this point. This first slide, it has been updated since last time you saw it. We do this visitor profile study every 2 years. The last time we presented was information from 2014. This is updated information for 2016. As you can see, the total number of visitors continues to increase, as it has for the past 7 years, so we're very excited about that, as well as the local tax revenue. Just as a reference point for local tax revenue, what is used in that number is lodging, food and beverage, retail, recreation, local transportation, and air travel. There is a 40-slide PowerPoint deck if anyone is interested to see everything that goes into this. But we do use a company called Tourism Economics, who is the expert in DMO information across the United States. This was a request that happened in October as far as how the tourism-generated taxes break down for the local economy. I know that it was sent to the city manager's office. However, we wanted to make sure that we shared this during this time with everyone else. As you can see, for the first time, hotel motel tax is the highest tourism generating tax out of all those that you see under local taxes. So that falls right in line with the increased number of visitors that we are seeing, the increased number of overnight stays, not only for conventions, but also for our leisure travelers as well. 2017 was a banner year. I can see on the slide that the numbers aren't there, but in 2017 we did book 381,194 room nights for future years. That was about 10,000 above what our goal was as a sales team, so we're very excited about that. Some of the things that attributed to the actual success that we had in 2017 as far as consumption is concerned, not only for bookings, but we had a number of very high-profile events in 2017 that occurred in Kansas City, including the men's D1 Regionals basketball tournament and U.S. figure skating. Both of those large sporting events not only brought a lot of notoriety for the city, but also brought a lot of economic impact. So in talking about the 381,000 room nights that were booked, the placement here is just, again, it's just a point of reference to show how far out we are actually booking business at this point. In order to build these successful years like we had in 2017, we have to get a very early jump on this business. So we have booked business last year all the way through 2028. That is the furthest out that we have booked in quite a few years. So 11 years in advance is what we want to see in order to start building these optimal years. And bringing the most business that we can to Kansas City, especially with the influx of all the new inventory, which I will talk about. So the total for the bookings in 2017, we are estimating about a $320 million economic impact to the city of Kansas City. Some major events that were booked in 2017 are listed here. As I said, 2028 African Methodist Episcopal Church is not only one of the largest groups that we booked, but it is also, as I said, the furthest out. Some of these you will recognize as far as Educational Testing Service, Cerner, and some of our other annuals that we are very, very fortunate to have continue come back to Kansas City over and over, and that has much to do with all of the amazing updates that have been made to the city and the infrastructure improvements that have been made. In 2018, the top 25 conventions will generate about 205,000 room nights and over 170 million in economic impact. Those are just the top 4 that we see. Cerner, of course, continues to be our highest as far as economic impact is concerned. So again, the 4 that you see here are annual conventions. Big 12 conference, we are booked through 2020 on that. We are expecting to see the request for proposal come out. Our hope is for this year so that we can bid on that again and go ahead and get them to stay in Kansas City. They are very, very excited. They've been to Kansas City, of course, during the Big 12 tournament. And needless to say, the convention hotel and the airport are huge drivers for us hopefully becoming successful over Dallas in this next RFP process. Of course, on March 1st, we're all very, very excited that the Lowe's Kansas City Hotel did finally break ground. I know they are excited. So as you can see, a lot of the conventions that we have booked are listed there that have already contracted with the Lowe's and are contracting because of the Lowe's Hotel. The total for that is about 116,000 room nights. So as you can see, the demand is coming in where we knew it would. I guess it's that whole if you build it, they will come because they are. And so we're very excited to be able to host a lot of these new higher profile events. As part of our contract with the city, we do have a 3-year strategic plan that is in place at all times. We just completed our 2018 through 2020 strategic plan, which will be presented in entirety at a business session coming up for the council. However, these are just a few points of the strategic plan as it pertains to sales. And the reason that is significant, it is not to downplay the rest of the plan, but as far as our department or my department is concerned, the sales and services, we are very, very responsible for making sure that this convention hotel and all of the other developments are successful. So this just takes you through a little bit of what it's going to take for us to make sure that happens. We do have a plan in place and we are ready to execute. We hope, of course, to see an increase in conventions, focus on larger conventions and book them further out. And again, this goes to the point of booking that group that was 11 years out. We do have, although the strategic plan only goes through 2020, we do have a plan that goes through 2023. We have estimated that we need to add about 208,000 room nights in consumption by 2023. So we do have our work cut out for us. Our goal went up about 15% this year with the influx of the new hotel, which rightly so, Visit KC is up for the challenge and ready to do that. One of the things that, as far as our strategic plan and, just going through, it kind of encompasses a lot of these bullet points. Our team and Visit KC as a whole, one of the things that we are challenged with every day is making sure folks are educated about Kansas City. So not only do we expect our team to go out and make sure that happens with our clients. But one of our initiatives that doesn't necessarily directly come from the sales department, but absolutely comes from Visit KC, is the education of our local citizens as well, so that they can become ambassadors when we host these conventions and make sure that they are ready to welcome these folks when they come in, since we will be seeing a huge influx of more visitors. And much of what we do through that is our VIP program. And I know that I mentioned that last time, but this is could be half day, could be full day program that actually Ashley Patton, who is with Visit KC, has single-handedly created and done a wonderful job. I believe it's about a year into our program. We have hosted a number of folks. I know Ashley could tell you exactly how many, but Kansas City Police Department was our first, our inaugural, if you will, class. So that went very well, and we would encourage all of the city employees to go through that, not only city employees, but anyone that's watching this right now, because it is very informative and it gives you more of an insight on your own community. So we're very excited about that, as far as the leisure side of our visitation as well as the convention side. As far as the education, we are going to have to make a big push with our marketing. And of course, this happens in addition to increasing our sales team, because we have to have more people out there doing what we do every day. Of course, this will come without any new funds. So we are doing what we can with increasing convention marketing, as well as making sure we have more people out there to educate folks about Kansas City. One of the other pieces of information that was requested in October was the trip volume data in our peer cities. You will see that as far as the day trips are concerned, which you see in the dark blue, Columbus is far exceeding everyone else in our peer set. However, Kansas City is leading the pack on our overnight visitation.
Isn't that where we'd rather be?
In the overnight visitation, absolutely. So that is why we're very thrilled to see that Kansas City is number one out of our peer cities. Of course, we could have put a number of cities on here, but these are the ones that we felt like were most comparable. And so we are coming in at about 12 million overnight visitors per year, which again continues to increase every year. So we're very, very excited about that. KC Film Office, just to give a quick update on KC Film, it continues to be an extremely successful part of Visit KC and of Kansas City in general. So you'll see on here the number of productions. Steph Scuppum is still a one-woman show, and she gets out there and represents Kansas City on a regular basis, and her tireless efforts are definitely reflected in what we're seeing. We would like to take this chance, of course, to thank the council, in particular Councilman Taylor, for being the champion in increasing the film incentive from $50,000 to $75,000 this year. And just a reminder to anyone that is watching that we are the only city in the United States that has a local film incentive. So we are, again, grateful for that. It definitely has a lot to do with why we're seeing such a success in that office. Last but certainly not least, we did host our Kansas City Visit KC annual convention on February 27th. Registered nearly 650 guests for that event, and we were able to have a number of local food and beverage entertainment and a keynote address by Avita Robinson. And I believe that we are going to show the quick video that we did at the annual meeting.
Kansas City is kind of on the hustle right now. Everyone's trying to do something and trying to go bigger and better.
There's a lot of good creative juice and flowing around Kansas City.
There's a very, very clear cultural revolution happening in downtown Kansas City.
If you're not doing this for something more, then what's the point? We really believe that Kansas City has something amazing to offer because we have such hardworking, down-to-earth, hospitable people here.
We want people to know that it's a great place, and we want to be able to attract people, whether it's artists and makers or just residents.
We live in the place where the food grows. We have awesome farmers markets and incredible farmers and chefs willing to reach out to them.
This town wraps its arms around creative people and celebrates creative people.
There's a lot of science involved in making beer, but there's also a lot of art and a lot of imagination to create things.
The people are driving this movement. These products are a direct correlation of that. Whether it's soap and candles or shrubs, or whether it's bars and restaurants, retail, parks, murals, graffiti.
Collaboration is born in the spirit of exploration. Passion is contagious.
We're stepping up to that next tier of city.
So as you can see, we certainly have no problem with things to educate people on, so it's just our job to get out there and do it. So, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. So, capital improvement for the convention and entertainment facilities.
Good morning, Mike Young with the Department of Convention and Entertainment Facilities. Strategy A is to continually invest in annual appropriated capital improvement projects for the city's convention and entertainment facilities. The last couple of KC stats, I've reported that we had were awarded some funding for some capital improvement projects, and we had started those projects. So we've completed many of them. A lot of them have a lot of lead time, a lot of execution time, but we have finally completed many of those projects. So I'm going to give you a report on those today. The municipal auditorium, we've completed renovations in our arena locker rooms. We've repainted all of the walls. We've installed new carpet in all of the spaces, installed new lockers for all of our teams that participate and all of our other events that utilize those spaces, and also replaced all our video screens in those rooms. There's a picture there. We've got 4 of those rooms plus 2 official rooms that we've renovated this past October, so that was a great renovation for us. We replaced our arena basketball court and the basketball goals. The previous set of equipment was over 10 years old. It had outlived its life expectancy. To give you an idea of how many games we play 70 games this year of basketball on that new court. So that was a great improvement for all of our clients like NAIA, MIAA, UMKC, and our NAPB team that played this year. So we're happy to have that new equipment in the facilities. We also installed new carpet and wayfinding signage and stair lighting in the music hall, as well as updating the HVAC system. The music hall is a much older facility, so we're constantly making improvements in that space. We're going to be actually replacing all the theatrical lighting in that space and also the sound system in that space this summer. So continue to make improvements in those spaces to help us market those facilities to all of our customers that come through the facilities. So the 13th Street digital sign, can't miss it if you drive down 13th Street. It's a fabulous improvement. We've received nothing but rave reviews about it. It's really helped us market the facilities. We've actually had people come in to our box office and buy tickets just because they saw the sign and saw an event. They said, I had no idea that event was here. So we've already seen a return on our investment in that sign, and it will continue to do that for us for many years. So we're very happy to have that new sign. It measures 7 feet by 52 feet, so it's quite large. High definition, so very happy to have that. We replaced our telescopic portable seating risers. Believe it or not, the original equipment was from 1974 when the building was opened. So we had, I think we'd outreached its life expectancy by many, many years. So we're very happy to replace that seating section there. You can see this is a picture of the Mecum Auto Auctions, which is very successful in Kansas City, one of their best markets that they're in. They tell us every year. They come twice a year. They thought this was just a fabulous improvement and well deserved for those groups. PTK, Phi Theta Kappa, was a large convention that's coming in town in 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. They'll be using 11 of those riser systems, so they'll be seating over 1,000 people on them. So they're very excited to be using those as well. In our Lobby 2200 Cafe, if you come visit us, you'll notice that our cafe has been completely renovated to more of a grab-and-go concept. It's got some comfortable seating, a bar in it now, televisions for you to enjoy some coffee and maybe have a business meeting. It's open nearly every day. It's open during all of our event open hours. I can tell you that during Planet Comic-Con was the launch of that. Last year, in the same space, we sold about $1,000 worth of concessions. This year we sold $6,000 worth of concessions just based on the fact that you can walk in. It's more like Quick Trip where you can go up, get what you want. There's an attendant there that helps you brew coffee or heat your meal up or whatever you need. So we've seen a real significant increase in revenue just from that one concept that's been redesigned and renovated. So our security camera system replacement, I reported on that last time, is still underway. We're replacing about 345 cameras throughout the complex, inside and out. As I discussed last time, security is paramount in our industry, and we want to make sure that all of our patrons and customers are as safe as possible. And when we have issues, we have it on tape. So I'm not going to go into great detail on where all those are at, but you'll notice them throughout the facility. So great project, and we'll be completing that this summer. Future capital improvement projects, we work with the budget office to help us appropriate funding. As we get that funding, we start to chip away at our priority deferred maintenance list, and then if we have any capital improvement projects that we'd like to do, we work with the budget office to find those funds. Some of those upcoming capital improvement projects that are unfunded, but we will be working on that funding, is the municipal auditorium roof replacement project. That roof is about 30 years old, 28 to 30 years old, so we need to replace that roof. The conference center roof dates back to 1994, so it's aged and needs to be replaced as well. Our grand ballroom kitchen build-out, in anticipation of the Lowe's hotel opening, they will be the caterer in that space, so they will have that kitchen. We're going to build that out for them. The grand ballroom carpet replacement, we need to replace that carpet. It's approaching almost 10 years now, so it's well worn, and we try to keep it as clean as possible, but it's 10 years old, and we need to replace that carpet. Similar in the meeting rooms, 2100 and 2200 and 2300 carpet areas, that all needs to be replaced. It is over 10 years old now, so we'll be working on a project to replace that in the near future. Our lobby 2200 escalator is approaching 43 years old, so we'll be wanting to replace that soon as well. The other one that we have in that space was replaced back in 2012, so we'll be working on funding for that as well. Two other projects that we would really like to get done is in the music hall restrooms. Those restrooms haven't been renovated in many, many years. We're seeing more and more Broadway shows through our partner with Broadway Across America. The Lion King is coming up. It's quite a large show for us. It's a 3-week run. You may know that we have Hamilton coming up in 2019, so that's another huge show that we have coming. One of the major complaints that we get out of the music hall is the restrooms, and it's really the only complaint that I see on a regular basis. I can tell you that my mother has complained, so she said I have to do something about it.
Yeah, yeah, they really aren't good.
No. So we're going to work really hard to find that funding and get that project done, hopefully sooner rather than later. And with that, the little theater restrooms would go along with that project as well. So. Just wanted to kind of highlight our top 10 public events. I know Corey touched on some of our large conventions, but we do public shows as well. Planet Comic-Con was a massive show for us this year. I think it probably was the all-time largest show that we've had in the facilities in the history of the building. Les Miserables was another large event that we did through Broadway Across America, the music hall, as well as The Waitress and Finding Neverland. So you can see those events are very well attended. I never see an attendance report that's low. It seems like it's always between 1,600 and sold out, so 2,400 people. So they always do really well, and they're very happy with the building. They're very complimentary of the staff, all of our partners and our service providers. They work really well together. It's a partnership, and they know that we're there to support them. The Kansas City Auto Show was a great event this year. If you didn't go, you got to come down to the auto show next year. They really do a lot. They had a concert this year. They had a couple of artists there that performed, so that was fun for everybody. World of Wheels had their best year in recent history. I spoke to the promoter yesterday, actually, and he told me that this was his best year he's seen in 10 years. So very happy, very complimentary of the staff, really loves Kansas City, a lot of support. He has a lot of good turnout for his exhibitors. It's a custom car show. It's been coming here since before I can remember, and we really appreciate their business. So, Holiday Mart, another great show for us in October. The RV show had record attendance this year as well. I think the economy is really driving a lot of these things. I know that the RV show, they're there to sell RVs, and they did sell a record number of RVs, so I think that's a good sign that that industry is flourishing. The Kansas City Royals Fan Fest was, again, well attended. We think that's a great community event. We really appreciate the fact that we have the Royals Fan Fest, and we support them. They seem to do great every year. Their show looks great. They take up all 5 halls. And we look forward to them winning the World Series next year. And finally, the Kansas City Sports Show has been a long-term show for us. It's an annual. It's been around for over 50 years, I think. It's a great show. They have great attendance. They really have a great group of people that run that show. And we really appreciate all the hard work they do to bring that show to Kansas City because, depending on the economy, those shows can be up and down depending on the year. So, but they do a really good job of promoting that event every year. So, Jumping into the total events held at the convention center, this is just a really important data point for us, and me in particular. It's really interesting to see how the economy grows, our attendance grows, the number of events grow, and we just kind of keep inching up. As you can see there, in fiscal year 17, we had 283 events with roughly 692,000 people in attendance. So that's a big number. It's a lot of people coming through the building. That's a lot of cleaning. That's a lot of setups. We operate 7 days a week, almost 350 days a year, probably 20 hours a day. So that building sees a lot of visitors. We have a lot of wear and tear. We have a lot of maintenance, ongoing maintenance, capital maintenance, all those types of programs that we have to constantly stay up with. So this is a facility that generates economic impact to the city, and I think people should really understand that, we bring people to the city. They spend tax dollars. They spend money in restaurants. So this is really an economic engine for the city, and it's important that we keep up with it. And just going through some of our events, as you can see, it's just pretty normal. Our non-citywide conventions has stayed relatively the same, maybe increased a little bit. Of graduations, we do 18 to 20 graduations a year in the music hall and the arena. Consumer shows are great. We keep having banner attendance there. Our citywide conventions seem to grow, and with the lows, we know that that's going to be successful and help us drive larger conventions and more conventions. Our meetings and seminars, we stay very busy with those in our meeting rooms. Our performing arts, Broadway Across America, again, can't say enough good things about all that they do for us in the city. Our sporting events, again, we had 70 basketball games this year. That didn't count all the cheerleading competitions we have, the wrestling events that we do. So we're staying very busy in the arena, and that building is looking really good. We've done a lot of improvements in the last few years in there. And then just going through customer service, just looking back at the last 9 years, we've really been able to keep a high level of customer service, being open as much as we are, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. The last few weekends we've had up to 8 events on a weekend. That's a lot of logistics that you have to coordinate. So we're not always perfect, we know that, but we strive to be perfect. We want to achieve a 5. Our goal on paper is a 4.5. We've stayed right in there and above that. But if I can get a 5 on every survey, I think I'd finally have absolution and completion. So that's our real target. And that's my
Yeah, thank you.
presentation.
All right, so we have one or a couple strategies left quickly. Strategy D is a brand new strategy for the business plan, and I believe both city planning and then Parks Department will have a quick slide on each. So.
Yes, as it relates to overall historic preservation, a number of different roles we take on as a city. The first is really to identify historic properties. So you're seeing that the current survey we're looking at the Historic Resource Survey, is really looking at modern architecture. So it's architecture from the 1940s, the 50s, and through most of the 1960s. So far over 3,000 properties have been surveyed. And that survey happens not only with city staff, but also city staff engages other interested groups and organizations to prepare eligibility forms for those structures as well. Preservation also means stabilizing existing resources and structure, and the investments that the city committed in the 18th and Vine area, including dollars to stabilize buildings that are down there and make them ready for adaptive reuse. Through the Landmarks Historic Trust Corporation, a separate 501c3, facade easements are given to buildings. So those owners who are willing to commit to the preservation of their facades can work to have these easements established. Right now, we have numerous historic buildings under renovation or recently completed, everything from the Pickwick Building, the Hotel Indigo, and the Fairfax Building, Westport Junior High School, West Armor Apartments, Kemper Arena is deemed historic. So we have many historic properties under rehabilitation as well. And then you mentioned, of course, alluded to the Kansas City Museum and the renovation that it is currently undergoing.
All right, KC Museum.
Good afternoon. We are making great strides in the renovation and restoration of the Kansas City Museum, beginning with Corinthian Hall, which is the mansion on the property. There are 5 original buildings on the property. J.E. Dunn started construction back in November, and we are nearing the point where we are beginning to rough in spaces and close up walls. So that's a very exciting part of the project. I also want to mention that it is, of course, very important to preserve our historic structures, but also it's important to preserve the collections of these institutions. The Kansas City Museum has been collecting artifacts and archival materials for nearly 80 years. The collection is enormous. It is the core of everything that we do at the museum. So it's very important that those materials are preserved correctly, up to museum industry standards, and I'm very proud to say that our collection that is partly owned by the city, so this is a city cultural asset, not a financial asset because we don't monetize the collection, but it is a very significant cultural asset that is being taken care of exceptionally well. We have a team of museum professionals, small team, but led by Denise Morrison, who's been with the museum for over 30 years. And I do mention it as the city looks at other collections that are owned by the city to ensure that we are looking at collections as part of the overall dialogue about historic preservation in addition to just the structures. One other thing to note, because I think it could be helpful to understand that the Kansas City Museum's mission is, at its core, it's an educational mission, but it is also a social and civic mission. We are very focused on looking at developing exhibitions and programs and experiences at the museum through the lenses of social equity and civic unity, and very interested in working with other departments at the city to achieve these goals, especially as we look at workforce development opportunities as we increase staff at the Kansas City Museum to serve our audiences. We are still on target with our construction timeline, and we'll continue to give you regular updates as we move into this next phase, which is the development of all the print and digital content for the museum. That'll take us about 12 months to do that, but we are in a good place to do so because we've developed a strategic plan, a business plan, a visitor experience plan, and soon we are creating an economic impact analysis for the museum. Thank you.
Thanks, kid.
All right. Last but certainly not least, strategy on the short-term rental ordinance.
Thanks, Julie. Again, Jeff Williams, City Planning and Development. February 22nd of 2018, the council passed an ordinance that allows for the establishment of a legal path for residents and property owners to offer short-term stay. There are provisions on where that is allowed. It's just based upon the zoning of a property. But I really wanted to highlight here that we were going to begin this registration and administrative approval process on May the 8th. So it's a couple weeks after we go live with our new Compass KC permitting system. The enforcement of those types of establishments or people operating illegally, that begins 3 months after on August 8th. So it's very important for anybody who is wanting to get their properties registered that they work with us after May 8th. And even if we reach August 8th, as long as somebody is in the application stream, they're fine. The application will continue to be considered. So when August 8th happens, as long as you're in the process, it will not be deemed a violation if you're running that type of operation in your home. So those are the highlights. So more information to come in terms of specific registration and application requirements.
All right. That takes us to the end.
We're good. Thank you all very much. Good day. It was a very good. She's harder core than Julie.
Kate.
Kate, I'm sorry.
that's fine.
Yeah, Julie is harder core than Kate. But we did finish on time. Don't forget to vote, all of you who don't have your vote stickers on. I'm going to assume they're in your pockets or they fell off as you were walking. But you can get another one at your local vote dispensary place. Have a good one. Thanks.
Everybody.
They combine with a different kind of dispensary, they get lots of traffic.